Hello, hi, and welcome back to my channel. In today's video and in the upcoming videos, we will be working with Supabase. We will understand what is Supabase and how we can perform the core functionalities that Supabase provides to us. So we will first of all understand what is Supabase, why we should use it, what are its merit and demerit, and then in today's video, we will also learn how we can perform a basic email authentication using it. So we will create an application which will be very simple and we will do a basic email authentication using Supabase. Okay, so let's get straight into it. So once you open up supabase.com, you will land to this beautiful landing screen. And as you can see, it clearly states what it is. So Supabase is an open source Firebase alternative. It provides you with all the core functionalities that Firebase provides. So it provides you with database authentication, like cloud functions, working with AI models, storage, lot of other functionalities are also there. The plus point being that it's an open source, it uses Postgres. So if you are someone who is into relational database, who doesn't want to use the Firebase method or style of creating documents and collections, and if you are someone who is very well versed with SQL and you want to use a certain product that utilizes that particular skill, then you can definitely use Supabase. On the other hand, since this is not backed by a bigger company, that might be a negative point for some of you folks. But as this is a fairly newer product, the considering that still the community is fairly strong, they put out a lot of updates regularly. And if you are someone who wants to try out something different, something other than Firebase, then you should definitely try this out. Okay. So if you scroll down, you will see the different functionalities that it provides. It provides you a database. As I said, it uses Postgres for database. So basically, you can even import and export your tables to Supabase. So for example, let's say you try this out and you didn't like it for some reason and you want to export it, you can easily do that. Then authentication provides you with all the different types of authentications. For example, provides you with OTP-based authentication, email authentication, all the social OAuth related authentication. It provides you with all those things. It provides you the edge functions, or basically the cloud functions. Then storage, real-time database changes. Then there's something called vector, which is basically it helps you to integrate your ML models. And you can see there are a lot of things also mentioned over here, and it works seamlessly. As you can see, it states over here, it works seamlessly with 20 plus frameworks. So be it be Flutter, be it be Kotlin, Vue.js, React, React Native, Svelte, or any other modern frameworks or languages, it supports it. So that is the gist of it. So in the upcoming videos, we will try to go through all these core functionalities first of all, and at the end, or after a couple of videos, we will try to create a project using all these functionalities together. So as of now, we will basically jump straight into Android Studio. We will try to create a project on Supabase, try to connect that particular project with our project on the Android Studio, and then we will try to see how we can do the basic email authentication using the Supabase. So let's get straight into it. So before we actually create the project, the last thing that I wanted to mention here is that you can check out the pricing of Supabase. You can see there are multiple tiers that you can choose from. So there are limitations. So as you are well versed that Firebase has a lot of, I would say it has bigger pool of projects that you can create in the free tier itself. So basically you can create two organizations with one single account, and each of these organizations can have up to two projects. Okay, so in total, basically you can have four projects that you can create in the free tier. Okay, having said that, let us jump straight into creating the project. So first of all, you need to sign up. Once you have signed up, then you can click on dashboard, and over here you would need to create an organization. So I've already created it. You can see, so I have this organization with me, so you need to create it. And I also have a project already created I was testing Supabase out with. But let's create a new project now. So we click on new project, choose the organization, and let us call it as learn Supabase. Give a strong password over here and then choose a region. For me, it would be South Asia, and click on create new project. It will take some time to create a project. So once it has created, you will see something like this, that it is setting up the project, and these are the API keys and the project configuration. We would require this when we are going to integrate Supabase with the Android project. So at that time, we will use these keys over there. But let us wait for it to finish up setting up the project. And once that is done, we will jump to the Android Studio. We will create a new project and we will set up the dependencies and the keys and all those things that is required. Okay. So let us do that. As we can see, it is already set up. Let us create a new Android project and add the required dependencies. So I have created a new Android project, and what the first thing that we need to do here is to add a couple of dependencies that we require. So we'll go to the build Gradle, scroll down, and we need to add a few dependencies. So these are the 3 dependencies that we require right now. Apart from that, we would also need to change this. So what I have seen is that this material 3 dependency is causing problems later on. So we need to add the version of 1.1.2 for this. So once we have added all these dependencies, let us sync the project. Now, once we have synced the project, the next thing that we need is something called the Supabase URL and Supabase key. So as I said, we require those keys that were mentioned in that particular screen. So we require those 2 things actually to actually link our Android project with the Supabase project. So we will simply, you can actually save it anywhere in the project you want. So for me, for the safety purpose, what I'm going to do here is that I will be adding those to my local properties so that it is not added to the GitHub repo that I'm going to push my code to, and then I'm going to use that in the actual implementation. So let me do that and I will then get back. Now, in order to get the URL as well as the key, what you need to do is you have to go to the project settings, go to API, and you will see this section which will have the URL and this section which will have the public key. You need to copy and put it inside the project, assign a variable to it, add it to the local properties. You can do anything you want, but just make sure that you have these 2 values with you inside the project. So for me, what I have done is that I have copied and pasted these 2 values inside the local properties, and then I'm using the Gradle local properties function inside the build Gradle to read those properties, and then I'm creating a build config field so that I can simply use build config to refer the values from the local properties, as I don't want to push the keys as well to the repo. Since local properties is inside the git ignore, therefore this file would be ignored and the actual values won't be pushed. Okay, just for the safety purpose, you can follow the similar step, or you can just simply, if you're doing it for testing purpose, you can just simply hard code it inside the function where we are going to use it actually. And also the dependencies that we have added, just to clarify, is that the first one is for the go to KT, and basically what this is basically a wrapper on top of the go-to repo that is created by Netlify. So this is a wrapper on top of it created for Supabase specifically, and then also it requires the Ktor client. That is what we have added here. And finally, for some usage of view model, we have added the view model compose as well, just to make it easier for us to use the view model, easier for us to create the view model objects. Okay. Now let's simply first of all create a couple of packages. The first one would be data, and inside the data we require model, and we also require something called network, and we will create another package outside called utils. Inside the network, we are going to create a file called Supabase client. Now this file will actually create the instance of the Supabase client, which will require the key as well as the URL that we have just added to our project. So this would be an object, and what we will do here is that we are going to add a couple of lines. So this is what we are adding. We are adding create Supabase client. This is the function provided to us by the Supabase dependency that we have added, and it requires the URL as well as the key. And inside the lambda, we need to add the actual functionality that we're going to use. So since we are going to use goto, we are adding goto. Now let's say later on we want to use Postgres, then we will have to add Postgres. So right now we are using goto, so we are adding, or we are installing goto. Let me simply import this. So I'm going to import this one. As you can see, it is referencing to my local properties variable over here. So instead of adding the URL and key inside the local properties and then reading it via build config, you can simply, for the sake of understanding or learning, you can simply just copy and paste the URL and key here itself. Okay. Now, once we have done that, let us add a couple of things that would be required. So first of all, let us create an auth model. So let us first of all create a view model. Okay. So let me simply add something called Supabase auth view model. This would extend view model. Okay. And we're going to add a couple of functions inside it. So now what would be the scope of our project? So the scope of our project would be to do like 2 or 3 functionalities. The first one is to actually register the user, second is to log in the user, and third is to log out the user. Okay, so we are going to add these 3 functions mainly and a couple of helper functions along with it. Okay, now before writing these functions, let us also create a sealed class for the different states that our project is going to handle, mainly loading, success, and error. So let us quickly add those states as well as a sealed class. I already have it with me, so let's simply call it as user state, and this would be a sealed class. Let me quickly add it. So I have added 3 states. So there would be a loading state, there would be a success state, and there would be an error state. Okay. These are the 3 states that we're going to handle in our project. After you have added the sealed class for the user state, the next thing that we would require before actually creating or adding the functions inside the view model is to create a shared preference helper. Why? Because once we have registered the user, it will give you an access token. Now this access token is something that we need to have inside our application itself. So this access token will basically have an expiration date and time. Basically it will have basically an expiration time. So we would require that access token with us whenever we are relaunching our application. So we need to check using that access token that whether the user is still logged in or not. So there are functions that we are going to use it. We are going to provide those access token to, which would help us to identify whether the user is still active or not. Okay. So that is why we are going to save that access token. In order to save that access token, we need to use any of the local databases, but the simplest of those for this particular scope of the project is the shared preference. Okay, so we are going to create a shared preference helper quickly, and I'm going to add it inside, utils. So I'm going to create a new class called shared preference helper, and I have the methods with me. So what I've done here is that I've created a class which takes in the context. I have a companion object which is basically having the preference key. There are 2 functions. One is to save the data and the second one is to get the data. The first one is basically receiving the key as well as the data that you want to save. So we are basically referencing to the preference key, creating the shared preference object and putting the key in data. And the second method is to actually get the data from the provided key. So we are getting the key, we are referencing our preference key, and then we are using the key to get back the data. Okay, this is very simple. The TLDR for this is basically we are saving some data to the application locally, and then we are fetching that data via the key. Okay. So once we have added the shared preference, now we can go to the Supabase auth view model finding. Okay. Inside the auth model, let us add the mutable states for our user state. Okay. So I've added the mutable state for the user state. The initial would be loading. So this is this would be a private variable which we are going to use inside this view model itself, and this would be a public variable which we are going to observe in the UI and make the changes accordingly. Okay. Now the first function that we are going to add is the signup function. So we are going to add a method called signup, which would require a context, the user email and the user password. And then inside this, what we need to do is we need to add vModel scope launch, and then we will wrap it inside try catch block. So you can actually provide specific exceptions also instead of giving a generic exception. So what I mean by that is that the method which we are going to use, in case it provides or it throws an exception, you can specifically use that exception to understand what is the error. Okay. What we are going to do here is that we are going to use the client over here and then call the functions on top of it to actually do the sign up process. So we are going to say Supabase client. Or we can simply import this instead of writing the entire thing. And after client, we have to use the go through to perform the authentication. As I said earlier, that we are using go through to perform the authentication, and then we will write sign up with. Now it takes in provider, and for the provider it will be email. So just choose this one, and it takes in two values that you need to provide. The first one is the email. Inside the lambda body, you need to provide the email and the password. There are a couple of other things also that it takes, like redirect URL, just in case you want to redirect it to a particular URL after signing up or something like that, and a configuration if you want to do a couple of other things as well. The configuration to set to use for the sign up. Okay, and I said earlier that it throws a specific exceptions for different error cases, so you can specifically handle these three different exceptions if you want inside the catch block. Okay. Now if everything went well, what we need to do here is that we need to actually save the token that we are getting once the user has signed up. So right now what we have done so far is that we have created a method which is passing the context, email and password. Then we are using go through provided by the client that we have created and calling the method sign up with, and the provider for signing up is email. Okay, so we are adding email, and inside the lambda body for the email configuration, since it requires two things, email and password, we are providing those two. So once we have done this, and if everything went well and nothing, if it doesn't go to the catch block, it means that the user has signed up successfully. So once we have signed up, and the next thing that we want to do here is that if everything went well, that means if this block runs successfully and it doesn't go to the catch block, we can simply save the access token. So for doing that, we'll create a function called save token, and we'll pass the context. And if we will create a method called save token over here, which basically takes in the context, and what it does inside this is that it uses go through to call the method current access token on null. Actually, we can remove this. We want to save it as null in case it is null, and we can actually update the type of data to a nullable string. So Yeah, so we are getting the access token. So in case we have the access token, we will get the access token. Otherwise, we will get null as the value. Then we are creating an object of the shared reference helper that we have created earlier. And finally, we are calling the method to actually save the access token. So this is the key access token for which the value we are saving is inside this particular variable. Okay. Now, if all these things go smoothly, it basically means that we have successfully registered the user as well as saved the token. So what we will do here is we will update the user state to be success, and we will say registered user successfully. And in case there isn't any error, we will just simply say user state error, or we state value user state error, and we will just simply say error e.message. In case you are adding the specific errors that I talked about, which are these REST exception, HTTP request timeout exception, and all those things, it provides you with a concise error string. You can then therefore use it, okay, for the error part. Now this was for actually saving the token, right? Now we will also require a method to get the token. Okay, so let us add that method also. So we will add it over here called get token, which also will take in context and it will give back a nullable string. And it is very simple. We are just simply calling the or creating the object of the shared reference helper, and we are calling the method get string data for the key that is access token. You can either use the key as a string directly over here or create a variable and then use that variable for the key. Okay, it's totally up to you. This entire project is just to give you a demonstration how you can actually connect it. You can actually make it more concise, more clean. It's totally up to you. Okay. So the next thing that we want to do here is to do the login process. So up till here, we have actually dealt with the sign up process. We have also added the methods that would require to do so. Okay. Now for the login process, we are going to add another method called login, which would require the similar parameters, context, user email, and user password. And inside this, we will also add the module scope, add the try catch block. Okay. And over here, what we will do is we will write client.goThrough. We are going to use goThrough login with provider will remain the same email. And similarly, for the email configuration, we need to pass the user email. For the password, we need to pass the password. The user password. Okay. And similarly, as we did for this step, for the sign up step, we are also going to add the save token for this as well. So let's say you have registered the user. Okay. Now let's say you have logged out the user. Now we want to again log in the user. At that step, we are going to call this method. Okay. So in this step also, we are going to need to save the token. Okay. And similarly, as we did for the sign up, we will also require to update the state. So we'll write user state success and we'll say logged in successfully. And for the error, we're going to say user state value, user state error, and we'll just simply pass the error message. Okay. For the logout, we will add another method. So we'll say logout. This will be also in the model scope launch. We will add the try catch block. We'll add the exception as well. And we'll just simply write client.goThrough logout. There are some parameters you can provide for the logout. There's something called logout scope also, so you can include that as well inside it, but we are not going to use it for this simple demo. And if it is successful, we will again update the state to be success and we will write logged out successfully, And in case there is any error, we are going to say value user state error and then the error message. Okay. Now these are the three things that we are going to perform: sign up, the login, the logout. There is one more thing that we need to add is actually to check if the user is logged in or not. For example, let's say you have registered the user and then you have closed the application. Now, when you again open the app, the user should be logged in. Okay, so the user should be logged in since the access token is not expired. Okay, so in order to check that if the user is not logged in, there are a couple of different methods, but what I have found useful is what I'm going to talk about right now. So we will just create another method called user logged in. This would also take in context, and we will add the view model scope launch, add the try catch block. You can simply add the user state for the error here. Okay, now inside the try block, what we are going to do is we are going to get the token that we have saved locally, first of all. So we will say val token equals to get token context. So this would give us the token that we have saved locally after either logging in or either after registering the user. Okay, now if the token is null or empty, we are going to simply just update the state. Okay, and we are going to pass an error saying that the user is not logged in. The user is not logged in. In case it is not empty, what we need to do is we are going to use client to go through and we are going to retrieve the user based on the token that we have saved. So we are going to pass that token. So what this method does is that it returns you back the user info object. So you can use that object and save it locally and then use it inside your project, as well as it actually uses the token and calls an API in the background to verify whether the session is still there, whether there can be a session for this token or not. And if the session is possible, it activates that session. Okay. So let's say you have given the duration or the expiration of your token for a week. Okay. And somebody opens it up at the 6th day. Now what you want to do is that once the session is active again, since the token is still valid, we would require to refresh the token, right? So that it again extends the duration to another week. Okay. So to do that, what you will do is you will again use go to and you will write refresh current session. So let's say if the session is not active, this would actually throw an error saying that there is no active sessions. So in order to make sure there is an active session, we are calling this method, which is basically doing two things. It is making sure that the session is active, as well as it is returning the user info. And then we want to actually refresh the session, which is basically going to refresh the access token. Okay. So once we have refreshed it, we are again going to save the new access token, which is created after calling this method. So we are going to again call the save token context, and then we are going to finally update the user state to success, which is going to say that the user is already logged in. So to reiterate, we have created a method to check if the user is logged in or not. And inside the try block, what we are doing is we are fetching the token that we have saved earlier locally. And in case the token is null or empty, which would basically means that the user is not logged in, so we're going to update the user state to error and we are going to pass this message. And in case it is having some value inside the token variable, we are going to call this method called retrieve user, which will take in the token. It would activate the session if the token is still valid, and it will also give you back the user info object. And once you have received that, it means that the session is active and it is valid right now. Since it is valid, it would be better that we update the access token so that it again extends the validity to another week. So we will just simply call this method called refresh current session, which would refresh the access token as well. And then we are going to save the newer access token by calling the save token method. Okay. Now, once we have done all these things, the last thing is actually to create a very simple UI in order to see if all these methods are working correctly or not. That is the objective. We are just going to create a very basic UI to check if all these methods are working accordingly or not. Okay. Now, before we do that, before it actually happens, we need to do a few things inside the Supabase dashboard. So inside the Supabase dashboard, you will first go to the project settings. I wanted to show you the expiry limit. So as you can see, this is 3600 seconds, which is basically an hour. So the default is an hour and the maximum is 1 week. Okay. So that is the limit. You can update it accordingly if you want. You can change it. And then if we go to authentication, if we go to providers, you can see there is something called email. We can actually uncheck this confirm email because we don't want to do that for the sake of this particular demo. Okay, so we are going to uncheck this. We are going to save this, and this is the minimum password length. So the password should be of 6 digits, 6 characters. Okay, and these are the other different available providers for the authentication. Okay, so once we have enabled or once we have disabled this confirmation flag, we can again go back to the project and continue with the UI. Now going back to the UI screen, there is one component that we want to add. So I'm going to use a component that I have used in my previous video for showing a simple loading text. So I'm going to add it in outside here itself. I'm going to call it as loading component. It would be a file. I'm going to add this. It's basically a column and is having a text. That's it. Okay, nothing fancy over here. So basically a column and a text. And finally, if we go to the main activity here, finally we are going to add the UI as well as we are going to call the view model methods. Okay. So we are going to create a composable here. I'm going to call it as, let's say, main screen. Inside the main screen function, we're going to add a parameter called view model of type Supabase view model, and this would be equated to the view model, which is this. You can actually just import this part. So this view model is provided by the dependency that we have added, which is this view model compose. So it automatically creates an instance of the view model that we have specified over here. Okay. Now inside this, we are going to add a couple of variables, context, and some mutable states. So the first one is context, and second one is the user state that we are basically referencing to the user state inside the Supabase view model. And then I have added 2 mutable states, one for the email, one for the password. We also need to add one more mutable state called current user state to display the text according to the user state. Okay. Now we would add a launch effect, and we will call the is user logged in. So as soon as this composable comes to the screen, this launch effect would be called, and we would check if the user is logged in or not. Okay. That is the entire purpose of adding launched effect. After that, we are going to add a column with fill max size and padding 8 dp, And then we are going to add a text field with the value of user email, a placeholder text to enter the email, and on value change, we are actually changing the user email with the changed with the newer value that we are receiving from this lambda. We have added a spacer to give some space after the text field. Again, we are going to add one more text field for password. Similarly, we are going to equate the value with user password. We are going to add a placeholder to enter the password, and on change value, we are updating the user password with the value that we have received. Again, I've added a spacer, and now we are going to add a button to sign up. So it's, as you can see, the UI is pretty simple. I'm not adding anything fancy, just a couple of text fields and a couple of buttons. So this button will take care of signing up. I've added a text for sign up. And on clicking the button, we are using the view model. We are calling the sign up method. We're passing context, the user email and the user password. So I have not added any checks. As you can see right now, I have not added the text type, the input type for password as well, as we are just working for the demo purpose. So I have not added any such UI elements right now, and I haven't added any checks as of now. Okay, but you can feel free to add those. And after the sign up, I'm going to add similar button for login, text login, and on click we are calling the model.login to and passing the context, user email and user password. Okay, you can basically add checks to check if the email pattern is correct or not, if the user password is having the required length or not. You can add those things. It's totally up to you. And you can even decorate the user password text field such that it hides the text that you are entering. And finally, I'm adding another button to log out. But for the logout, I've just added a color so that it signifies that it is for logging it out. So I've made it to be red. Okay. And on clicking, I'm just calling a method, calling the method logout from the view model. So I added a text logout. Okay. Now after this, what we are going to do here is we are going to check on the user state. Okay. So this entire block will check on the user state. So when the user is in the user state loading, we are going to display the loading component. So if you remember that by default, the user state in the view model is having the value of loading. So by default, it will be in the loading state. Now for the success state, what I'm doing is I'm getting the message from the success and I am updating the current user state with this message. Okay, similar for the error. I am receiving the message from the user state error and I'm updating the current user state with the message. So you can handle the errors and success accordingly. I'm just creating a simple one screen application where I'm going to just display the different states as the different states changes. So in case if it logs in successfully, we are going to just display a simple text that the user has logged in successfully. In case there's any error, it will just give a text that there is an error. Similarly for login, similarly for logout. But you can, instead of showing the text, you can just show some different UI components. Okay. And finally, what we are going to add here is we are going to add a text. So in case the current user state is not empty, that means there is some value inside it, either an error or a success. We are going to display a text. Okay. So that's pretty much it actually. Now before actually running the application, let us pass the main screen here. And let us run the application and check if it is working correctly or if there are any errors which needs to be resolved. So this is the initial screen after installing the application to the emulator. So as you can see, it says user is not logged in. So from where we are getting this? So if we go to this is user logged in, if you remember that inside this particular check, we have added this particular text that if the token is null or empty, it should return this particular string, which is user is not logged in. So that is what we are getting since we don't have any token saved as of now. Now let us add some email. We can add anything you want. We are not verifying the email. Okay. That is why we can add anything you want. And then for the password also, just make sure that the password is of 6 characters. So I'm just adding anything. Now if I click on sign up, what should it do is it should go to the sign up method, call this method, and if it is successful, it should save the token and then update the state to registered user successfully. Or the one thing which we can actually add here is that before actually doing any of these things, we can actually update the user state to loading. Okay, so we can just say loading over here. And also for login and also for logout. Okay. Now if we let me refresh the app once more. So we're getting the same state that there is no token. Now let us add the email test@test.com and password 123. If I click on sign up, it should go to sign up, it should go to the loading screen. And if everything goes well, it should just give me a text that is registered user successfully. Otherwise, it should give me an error. Okay, let us click that. It gives me an error saying that failed with message Android okay. So what we have missed here is that we have forgot to add the internet permission. So we need to add internet permission and again try to register the user. So this happens. So as you can see, this happens. Just make sure that the user permission is there. Again, let us try it out. Sign up. And you can see we got the registered user successfully. Okay. Now to verify this, how we can verify that it has worked end to end. So in order to do that, we can go back to the Supabase dashboard. Now inside the dashboard, if you go to the authentication, now here it should come up. Yeah, you can see it says that test@test.com is a user which was last signed in on this particular time. Provider is email and this is the user ID. Okay, perfect. Now, if we try to reinstall the application, it should basically go to this is user logged in and check if the user is still logged in or not. And if it is not logged in, it should give this message. Otherwise, it should give this message. Since we have called the save token method here, we should have the token with us. Okay. And it should be a valid one because the validity of the token is 1 hour by default. So let us refresh the application. So instead of getting the not logged in, it should be is already logged in. So you can see it's go to the loading state and you can see it says user is already logged in. That means this method is working fine. Okay, so we were able to register the user. We were able to maintain the session of the user by using the token and saving it locally. Now let us log out the user. And you can see it says logged out successfully. Okay, there is one more thing that we can actually add in the logout method. So what we can do here is that we should also clear the shared preference as soon as we are logging out. Okay, otherwise what would happen here is that since we have all logged out already, but we still have the token with us, so upon again opening the application, it would have the token here, it would go inside this, but now since that token is no longer is having a valid session, it would throw an error saying that there is no token that is active in this particular session or something like that. So in order to not get that error, what we need to do here is we need to clear this session also. So we will add another method inside the shared reference helper, which is this, where we are basically creating the shared reference helper object and we are just clearing it out. Okay. Now if we go back to this auth model, we are going to add context. We are going to add or create a shared reference helper object pass the context over here, and after the logout, we are just going to share preferences, and inside the main activity, you need to pass the context. Okay. Now, if we try to rerun the application, let's try to rerun the application, and we would get the error, I suppose, for the first time, because we will be having that token, and therefore it will, instead of running successfully, it should go inside this exception and give the error. So let us try this and see if the error text is also coming or not. So right now, just make sure that, so right now we know that the token is there inside the local database with us in the shared preference. Therefore, this is not null, and this is not null. Therefore, it went to this block. And since the session is already since there is no active session for this particular token, as we have logged it out earlier, therefore it throwed an error with this message. So therefore, we are getting the error message correctly. Now let us log in the user in order to check whether the login method is working correctly or not. And then we will log out the user and finally restart the application to verify that we are getting the user not logged in message correctly instead of getting this error again. So we will just write test@test.com and password 123. And now if I click on login, it should go to the loading state and we are getting the login successfully. Now since we have logged in successfully, therefore the token now added is a newer one. And if I log it out, then that token is no longer valid, as well as we have already cleared the preference entirely. So there is no more shared preference in the application right now. Now, the final thing that we want to check is that if we restart the application, we shouldn't be getting the error message that we got earlier, and instead of that, we should get this message, which is user is not logged in. Let us test it out. So we can see that we got this message because this time the token was null and therefore it went to this particular block. So we were successfully able to connect the Supabase to the Android project. We were able to sign up the user. We were able to log the errors as well, which we got. Then we were able to log in the user, log out the user as well. So you can easily use this method to perform the basic email authentication very easily. Now in the upcoming video, we are going to see how we can perform the Google authentication, and in the upcoming videos, we will try to figure out the other core functionalities as well. So that was pretty much it for this particular video. If you like the videos, please feel free to click the like button. And if you have stayed till the end, please make sure that you subscribe the channel. And I'll see you in the next one. Thank you.